Recently in the Wuthering Waves community, there's been a lot going on and a lot of conversations happening around the game. As many of you who've kind of monitored what's gone on, there's been a big blow up between kind of like St. Tontis and Gotchasmack and Mr. Pokey, and it's been going on for a little while now, but it has, generally speaking, resolved itself, at least on that end. But I think as a result, we're seeing more content creators kind of start to get their opinions out into the space, some of them that I think would be interesting to go ahead and take a look at. What I wanted to talk about today is this tweet from EO. Now, some of you may know EO of Crash Out fame from a while back because, Wuthering Waves doesn't have a him. Haha, yes, he was, a lot of people went really hard on EO. Look, I like EO. I like his content. I've watched it for a long time now. I like his Endless Zone Zero content. I think it's just really engaging. And I do think people went in a little bit hard on EO when that stuff was happening the first time around. I still think he's a good dude overall. We've been able to hang out before. We've done some podcasts before. So all in all, I think he's a good dude. But I think it is interesting to see what he has to say about Wuthering Waves. Now, I will say, I'm not going to lie, this feels a little sub-tweety, like when we get into a couple of the points here, but we're going to go ahead and talk about them as we get a little bit deeper. But this is definitely off the back of St. Tontis and Gotchasmack. I would be shocked if he said otherwise, but hey, you know what? I've been wrong before. That's a lie. I've never been wrong ever. Not my whole life. When have I ever been wrong? Prove me. You can't prove me wrong. Find the clips. Clips or it didn't happen. Anyway, Yoku came in and said, had a banger convo with some amazing creators about the current roster of Gotcha games, but primarily Wuthering Waves potential. A couple key takeaways without digging into too much detail. And then he goes into a few different points here. But also, I am going to say, was it really a banger combo if I wasn't there? Yeah, I didn't think so. So make sure to drop that invite next time, EO. Okay, I'd greatly appreciate that. Wuwa's downfall will be that of the community, public perception, if they continue down this path. Criticism is not y'all's enemy. Now look, I see why he's saying this. I think in the whole exchange between St. Tontis and Gotchasmack and a lot of what's been going on here has really started to create a perception amongst people that the Wuthering Waves community is not able to take criticism in their game. I don't think that's the case overall. I know why some people are making those allegations, but if you go back into the history of the Wuthering Waves community and how much feedback has been given to the developers and the feedback that they've taken and applied to the game, I don't think that's 100% accurate. Now, he is saying here is if they continue down this path, so I'm going to give him a little bit of credit there that if this is something that continues, we are going to end up with some more toxic positivity and we're going to have another Genshin situation on our hands where no criticism is ever able to be given at all. I don't prescribe to the idea that the Wuthering Waves community is the Neo Genshin community. I do think that's just like an absolute crap take. There's definitely way more balanced people and way more people who do want to see more from this game and want more from this game, albeit there are a few very vocal, annoying people. No, before someone tries to twist that and say, you're talking about St. Tontis. No, St. Tontis is a friend of mine. We've talked about these things offline before. We're Gucci. I think he's got some fair points in a lot of cases, even if we don't always agree. Figureheads of these spaces need to hold more accountability / acceptance in their position of power, their voice, and police / shame the community together. This is where it feels a little bit sub-tweety to me, like throwing figureheads in quotations here, but not willing to actually create some examples. I kind of go back and forth. Like, yes, on one hand, I can see he's trying not to piss off anyone in particular and to target anyone. But I think with the timing of when this tweet has gone out, it does still feel like it's addressing that situation. I could be totally wrong there and reading into it, but that was kind of my read on it. And so it might just be poor timing based on that point. So I kind of wish there was a little bit more of a direct message there. However, I do agree with some of the sentiment of like, if you are somebody who's seen as an influential person in the Wuthering Waves space, like Gotchasmack, like St. Tontis, those are two that come to mind. I've got some other friends as well, like, Amethyst Abrams is definitely somebody who people have looked at in the past too, or Ryuku, who's a big Glazer, although we did drop a recent video, which is pretty great. That it does kind of fall to some of these creators that when you're seeing some pretty gross trends, people who might consider themselves fans or viewers of your content, to at least be doing your part to vocalize what people should be moving towards in these cases. So I don't think that's a completely unfair take. However, I do agree with the idea that at the end of the day, you're not going to be responsible or accountable to what like people in your chat do. Like if you do your part to try and mitigate certain things. If you do your part to, vocalize your criticisms and to voice that out there, at the end of the day, you can only be responsible for your own actions and everybody else has to be responsible for theirs. So I'm just going to leave that where it is. S tier content that isn't React/guides. I've got a big question here that I gotta be completely honest on. Like what? Like, what are you looking for? And I mean, it's like in earnest. Like, what are you looking for? Like gameplay, like no hit runs. I don't know, single character challenges like on the hologram bosses at the highest difficulty with an unleveled weapon. Like that content's already being created. Like a lot of that like high level sweaty combat content, some other competitions between content creators doing like gauntlets, doing other like game showy type things pertaining to it. Like that stuff is already being made. So if you're not considering that S tier content, what kind of content do you see that being? Maybe you're keeping your cards close to your chest because you've got something cooking in the back end. I don't know if that's the case, but I do think like, just to say like, it needs S tier content that isn't React/guides. What are you looking for? Because I've seen a decent amount there. Even lore content. It doesn't do as well as Genshin, but the lore content's there too. So what else? I'd be interested to, leave it in the comments down below what kind of content you'd like to see around games like Wuthering Waves or other gacha games in the future. There's a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon with Anata and NT's Touch and Go, Arknight's Enfield. The beta just got announced recently. So I'm interested to see like what kind of content are you guys going to be looking for that? Do you like just first impressions? Do you like just engaging with content creators? Like, I want to know, because like, I mean, it's tough. It can be really tough to, generate different video ideas for this kind of content and these kinds of games. So yeah, I don't know what I'd be interested to know what he's looking for there. Kuro needs to get more directly involved with benefiting their creators. This is like, again, so vague that it's hard to address directly, but the only thing that comes to mind if I'm comparing it to other games is like, one, sponsorships. They do still happen, albeit lower rates from what I've heard, but they do still happen for, different creators and stuff in the space. I don't know if we need like something like a content creator server or their creator experience server like they have with like Honkai Star Rail. Like, here's the thing, that got a lot of flack. That got a lot of flack from other creators. Like, one, at the end of the day, you're gonna have to pick and choose who can be participating in that server. And you're already creating an advantage for other creators. So it's kind of always gotten a bit of a bad reputation. It works well for guide makers, but for everyone else or anyone who doesn't get in those servers, you kind of get screwed a little bit. So they engage with their creators directly. Like, they've pulled in Rexcellent directly for events and live streams, like at different conventions. They do sponsor content. I just don't think they need to go that direction. So what more do you want to see from the company? Because that's always my counter question to a lot of these points of criticism. And this is, beyond EO, this is just for anybody who wants to bring that kind of criticism is, what are you looking for then? So what are you looking for when you're saying that Kuro needs to get more directly involved with benefiting their creators? Kickbacks? Like, I don't know. I'd be interested to see that. Maybe he just means contracts and I'm overthinking it, but I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of those things in action already. Kuro is going to fail at their vision if they don't quickly establish Wuwa as its own thing and not Genshin plus XYZ identity. Now, look, here's the deal. The way games work and the way art and creative endeavors work is most of the time they are going to be compared to their predecessors or things in a similar genre. Like Medal of Honor would get compared to Call of Duty and vice versa, or Battlefield would get compared to Call of Duty. Yes, they're very different experiences, but at the end of the day, when you're looking at it on a surface level, you're seeing first-person military shooter. Like, that's what's coming across there. So those cross comparisons always happen no matter what game it is or what's going on. That's why we have the whole moniker of Souls-like for even games that aren't from FromSoft, games that have a very similar style of combat. They still create that moniker. So I think like kind of that Genshin-like, I don't think is necessarily unreasonable. Now, in terms of establishing its own identity, I think it's been able to do that decently so far. I do see like more of a push of separation is probably needed, but I don't think that 100% like it can never be identified with Genshin is like a reasonable position. Maybe I'm straw manning there a little bit, I apologize, but that's kind of how I'm reading this. Kuro Games has been doing a really good job at establishing Wuthering Waves as its own piece, and I think they're on a good trajectory to continue to do so with its endgame content, with its combat, and it should keep going. I don't think it should stop where it is, just to be clear, but it is going in the right direction, at least on that point. Most of the systems in Wuthering Waves have no real purpose relative to the game itself, which further separates the identity, i.e. multiple features inspired from other mediums, but not fleshed out enough for their own game. Again, it feels like a little bit of vague posting here, like which systems, which ones have no real purpose, like what feels disjointed from the game, because as of right now, most things feel fairly connected to me. The only one that I think I still come back to, and it's something we've talked about on a podcast previously when we're talking about Wuthering Waves, is they do have a lot of like substats that don't really mean anything in a practical sense for the game, or that like really differentiates itself in any kind of unique way, or in a called for way. Like, so one I always come back to is the elemental damage types in Wuthering Waves. I don't think actually like benefits the combat in any way, like other than just adding like, oh, well, here's like an additional damage number. But the thing is that additional damage number doesn't really have any kind of practical effect. Like no bosses that I'm aware of are more susceptible to certain types of elemental damage. There's like, and I'm not even saying we need to have the whole reaction system like Genshin has, but like having those elemental effects have more of an impact than just literally being more damage number, I think would go a long way in some cases, whether it be increasing weakness break, whether it be having some kind of effect that can have a percentage chance of being procced when doing certain kinds of elemental damage. Like, I don't know, maybe you have something with Havoc where it does some kind of like stunning effect. There's a possibility or a small percent chance of a stunning effect taking place where like, you know, they're kind of like dazed and confused or something along those lines. There's a small chance to freeze or something with a glacio damage effect. Like it can be a smaller percent chance, but just something that makes the elemental damage type have more of a substantive value would be good, especially because they do have some unique categories when you're looking at the basic damage and heavy charged attack damage that you can do in Wuthering Waves that I think does lend itself to potentially some other unique kinds of play style. So I think those basic attack damage buffs kind of already serve the same purpose as the elemental damage buffs, but I'd like to see more from that, or more practical reasons or applications for that, other than, hey, look, this one specific orb enemy is immune to elemental damage. Like, so that's one, like, again, it's so vague in a way that it's hard to address directly, but other than that, I think most of the systems make sense, while some of them could still use some refinement in terms of like the echo tuning, and I know there's been some issues of resources. I get that. Some people have been having those complaints. Other than that, I don't know. It still feels like fairly connected to me. I don't think I'm glazing super hard here. I'm not saying it's the best system ever, but like, you know, let me know what you think. Immerse the player in the actual game, not the concept of better than Genshin. Like, I'm confused by what he's trying to say of this. Is this like an accusation towards the developers, towards content creators, like towards the gameplay experience? Because I would say it definitely has a lot of those game modes, like the Elusive Realm, the Hologram Towers. I know Tower of Adversity is a bit of a controversial topic about whether people like it or not. Like, I do think they've put their, at least in that game mode, they've put their own spin on it, but the other game modes feel really unique and don't actually even exist in Genshin. So they're offering a lot more to the experience than just Genshin Plus. And I know I've got some gripes about like the overall story for the game, but I do still think it's doing its own part in trying to separate itself. Maybe Renacita is going to be a small misstep. I don't know. A lot of people right now are comparing Renacita to Fontaine, and I am a little concerned there that there's going to be a little bit too much of a connection, that it doesn't fully separate itself. Maybe I think Wuthering Waves might have needed to go a different direction with the story and the world exploration before jumping right into something that, look, at least on the surface, has a lot of those comparable like styles and aesthetics and overall vibe. So I'm hoping very quickly the story can either twist it in a way that gives us a completely different experience to that of Fontaine. It doesn't seem to be like a water region. I know a lot of people are like pointing to the city and stuff itself for a lot of that comparison. So I am hoping that it does at least differentiate itself, because on the surface, yes, there's a little bit there, but again, I still want to know, who are you blaming for this? Content creators, developers, or the game itself? And again, I would love an example of what would do that. Wua is missing glue to the system. Top 3 most important to the game's problems. With respect, dude, what does that even mean? Are you kind of expanding off of earlier where you're talking about that most of the systems have no real purpose and relevance, so you're kind of missing the feeling of like integration there? Like, this kind of just like means nothing. It It just kind of feels like a platitude, if that makes sense. I'm hopeful for V2 hitting the ground hard and handling a lot of these issues that have been brought to light, as well as those that are major problems, but the vocal majority has shunned. A lot of these can be solved with the quickness, but takes effort and willing parties. Tons of the people like to pull the wool over their eyes until they smell the house burning down. By then, it's too late. And then we got a sweet gif of Yinlin winking. I mean, based gif, not gonna lie. Like overall, like I see what he's saying. Like he's approaching this with a certain level of optimism, which is good. But I know like some people have been having like a really adverse reaction to this post, and I will say like some of it seems a little bit warranted. Like there's a lot of vague posting here. One feels really subtweety when quoting figureheads like this. I'm not sure if I totally like that approach. Like, I think some of that needs to be addressed a little bit more directly. Can almost, I'm not saying it is this, but this can be interpreted as like petty, if that makes sense. So like you want to try and avoid something like that. Quite a few of these other points just don't hold like a lot of direct substance or anything that's like super actionable. S tier content that isn't reacts and guides. What S tier content are you looking for? Most of the systems have no real purpose. Give me an example of a system that doesn't have any real purpose. It doesn't really make sense, or what doesn't feel fleshed out to you. Wu is missing the glue. Glue to what? So like I think like overall, like there are things that if I start digging, I can start bringing points on. I've outlined a few of them here as we've been going through this, but like there's still like a lot missing. Now, EO did comment here, you're right on me elaborating more, could have given a stronger understanding, but similar to what you mentioned first about it being an EO take is the reason I stopped elaborating on a lot of the things here. It's on average something I said being purposely misunderstood. Now, that's fair. I'm not gonna lie, that's fair. EO's gotten a lot of flack on like Twitter and stuff in the past. Like I know some people are like, oh, Twitter doesn't matter, it's dog shit. Yeah, but it's still, you know, it still wears you down. It still wears down your mental. So like I can totally understand why he may have taken a little bit more of a vague post approach there. Personally, I think you still should have done it. I think you still should have done it, and you still should have leaned into it. But you know what? Your call. I will say though, he ain't no rat, because we got Fob Master baiting him out here. Fob Master baiting him out here. All right, EO, name the content creators you talk to. Need to hear where these takes are coming from. And he said, I'm not naming shit on here for low IQ Twitter users to bitch and moan at them about Lamau. I'll just DM you if you actually care here to talk about it. That's honestly, look, based EO take here, not just outing content creators when they don't want to. So that's all good. So it's good shit. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like, do you think some of these are like good points, bad points? Like, do you think they just needed more details, could have been better? That's kind of where I land on this, is like, they're like 50% takes where like you're going in a direction, but there's not enough to execute on. He gave his reason why. I don't know. The vague posting, be more direct in there. That's all I want to see. But hey, like I said before, nothing but love over here. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.